Hi, everyone, and welcome to Wellness Curated by Anshu Bahanda. Today, we're going to talk about inner strength being your armor against stress. Now, as you've probably noticed, everywhere you go, there seems to be a lot of stress. Whether it's young children coming back from school being stressed about homework or exams, or even people on the road. I mean, you just have to travel from one place to the other to see how stressed people are. And it just seems to be increasing. It seems to have gone up with COVID. And as someone called Hans Selye said, he was a Hungarian-Canadian doctor. And he did a lot of work on stressors. And he said, it's not stress that kills us, it's our reaction to it. Today, our guest is Dr. Ramesh Pattni OBE, and he holds 3 master's degrees and a doctorate from Oxford University. He's a highly sought after counselor and psychotherapist. I take a lot of advice from him, and he actually was talking about how you can deal with stress by building your inner strength. And I found that very intriguing. So welcome to the chat, Dr. Pattni.
Thank you, Anshu. Thank you for having me again. And it's a pleasure to be with you.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to have you here. Now, Dr. Pattni, as I was just saying in my introduction, stress levels have gone up hugely in the world. And especially since COVID, they've gone up even more. And we all seem to be living in this fight or flight sympathetic nervous system. And I have a theory about it, but I wanted to ask you, what is stress and why do we experience more and more of it all the time?
Mm-hmm. So, like you rightly pointed out at the beginning, is that stress is something which many of us have been feeling for some time. And of course, COVID was a situation in which it seems to have enhanced the whole kind of experience of stress. And how do we recognize stress? We can recognize stress by just looking at others and looking at ourselves. And there are, of course, many signs and symptoms of stress. So, for example, in the body, people start having headaches, nausea, and sometimes you have this stomach kind of problems, shallow breathing, heart palpitations. You have aches and pains in the body. And somebody starts telling you, oh, I feel this headache is never going to go because I feel so stressed and this headache is there. And the feeling is there as well. So, for example, we feel anxiety, fear. There's this kind of foreboding about something bad is going to happen. We feel frustrated about things and we become snappy in our behavior. People become snappy and, they at once get triggered off by something very slow. So something very small. And they also, some people, tend to withdraw, flight, like you said, fight or flight. And this kind of flight behavior is that you can't manage the stress and therefore you start withdrawing from everything. There is indecisiveness. People then become very kind of confused and not knowing what to do. Sometimes they become tearful and all this kind of symptoms of stress. So where does stress actually come from? What is stress? Stress is your experience in relationship to the world around you, which you find challenging, which you find in one way or the other dangerous to your well-being and your life even. And as much as you kind of perceive that there is danger around you or there is a challenge around you, then stress will begin to arise. And like you said, there are many stressors. People can be stressors. Physical situation can be stressors. Even having something slightly out of line in my life can be a stressor, which then triggers off the whole stress response. And the stress response is what I was just telling you about, is that there are different kind of signs and symptoms which begin to arise. Now let's look at stress. What is stress? a very simple way of thinking about stress is, it is the relationship between demand and capacity. So we can think about
Between
stress as,
demand and
and
capacity.
that's right.
Okay.
So
Okay.
stress is equal to, if you put it as an equation, stress is
Right.
equal to demand over capacity. So
Okay.
imagine now that the demand is going up, going up, going up, like it
Mm-hmm.
was in the COVID times. So many demands are coming up: physical demand, personal demand, relationship demand, even moral demands, which are going
Mm-hmm.
up. So we find challenging situation. These are called demands, which are
Okay.
perceived to be placed on us. They may not actually
Okay.
exist, but I mean, they exist, but we perceive stress in different ways. Just like, we talk about the half glass, full or
Mm-hmm.
empty. So one thing which I perceive as very stressful may not be stressful to you at all, right?
Mm-hmm.
So in other words, there is another component to stress, which is capacity. So
Right.
if I have a lot of capacity, then I can deal with huge number of challenges. But if I have a limited capacity, then even a small demand can trigger off the stress. Now, this
Yes.
demand, as I was saying, can come from many different directions. And the
Right.
capacity is related in terms of our physical capacity, emotional capacity, our intellectual capacity, our
Mm-hmm.
moral capacity, right? So capacity is
Right.
also for the different things. So
Okay.
demand over capacity, which can also be thought of as pressure. Pressure. We all feel this pressure, right?
Yes. Yes. Yes.
And pressure versus resilience. If there is a pressure on something, if I'm pulling a kind of rubber band, then if it is resilient, then it will keep on stretching. And if I leave it, it
Mm-hmm.
comes back to its original position. That is called resilience.
But
If
if
it
it's
is not,
not, then it breaks.
exactly. So it will break if
Yes.
it is doesn't have the resilience. So that pressure and resilience is similar in idea to demand and capacity. The third way of talking about stress is that I can think of pressure, demand as a challenge.
Okay.
Challenge, which is a challenge to myself, my relationship with the world. So it could be seen as a challenge. And people often say, I
Okay.
find this job very challenging. I was
Mm-hmm.
talking to an investment banker this morning, and he says,
Right.
life is absolutely so stressful, 24/7. I'm on the WhatsApp, and the manager is kind of, phoning me every few minutes to tell me, what about this? What about that? What about that? He is at a point of a kind of almost a breakdown. So this
Mm-hmm.
becomes a challenge. Now, challenge versus inner strength. So we can talk about
Challenge versus.
capacity. We can talk about
Yes.
capacity as resilience, or we can talk about
Mm-hmm.
it as inner strength as well. Why?
Okay.
Because
Uh,
capacity means what are the psychological resources you have?
okay.
Yes.
So what you're saying, Ramesh Bhai, is that there is uh, saying stress is our relationship with the world,
Mhm,
which should actually be a joy rather than
mhm,
pressure.
mhm.
And because a lot of us are living our life like this, are living our life pressurized and feeling pressure, then the joy out of our lives is gone.
That's right.
Correct?
And that's right. And what happens is that because stress is that kind of bodily or a mental response to that, there is a clear relationship between stress and well-being. As you know, that
Okay.
you talk to so many
Yes.
people
Yes.
about well-being, right? And they talk about various different things which kind of are in opposition to well-being. And stress in itself is such a response at the individual level that it takes
Right.
away the sense of well-being. And well-being, of
Mm-hmm.
course, is related to happiness and joy, is it not? That if I feel
Yes.
well
Yes.
in my body, if I feel well in my mind, of course, there is a capacity to feel joy and happiness in my life. So there is this
Yes.
kind of relationship between the two as well. But remember that, this kind of challenges can come from any direction. So, for example,
Yes.
you were talking about COVID, at the time of
Hmm.
COVID, there was so much stress. And one of the, unfortunate things which people were experiencing is loss.
Yes.
Loss in many
Yes.
different ways: loss of family, loss of friends, loss of job, loss of this, that, and the other. And it
Also,
got so
loss of the way they were used to being.
exactly. That's right. In fact, our whole life was disrupted by COVID, so that I
Yes.
cannot even step out of the house without fearing, right? That
Yes.
I'm going to catch this horrible thing called COVID and I may end up in hospital. And I remember one lady during the early days of COVID came to me and says, I cannot bear it any longer because I have
Hmm.
lost both my parents in 2 weeks. Now imagine the
Right.
kind of grief and loss and stress which is being experienced by this person.
Yes.
And at the
Yes.
moment, think about what is going on as far as the economy is concerned. Economic stress is huge at the moment because people are,
It's massive.
saying to themselves, the energy bills are rising. They're going up
Mhm.
by a factor of 4, 5, 6 in some cases. How do you deal with that? So it then becomes a pressure. It becomes a challenge. And if I don't have the capacity to respond, then it becomes an issue. So in other words,
Right.
that if we think about stress as challenge versus inner strength, the more inner strength I have, the more capacity I have to then deal with the challenge. So that basically
Okay.
is the overall view.
Okay. So, in terms of what you're saying, that it becomes it becomes inner strength versus challenge. Now, there's a lot of suggestions on how to deal with stress, and you used a great example just now, like energy bills.
Mm.
People are freaking out because they're saying, "Will we afford to live in our houses? Will we afford to have heating?"
Yeah.
So, I mean, how can we deal with issues like this? Is it
Mm.
that 10 minutes a day of meditation? Is it
Mm.
a whole lifestyle?
Mm.
How do you suggest we deal with it?
Yeah. So there are things which will happen which will be beyond our control. So when I say your
Yes.
relationship with the environment, sometimes you cannot control the environment. So for example, how can we control the price of energy?
Hmm.
Okay, to a certain extent, government is trying to control it and say, okay, we'll put a cap on it and this, that, and the other. But then there are things beyond your control. But there are things which are within your control, which is how do you respond to that?
Okay.
And situations will keep on unfolding in your life, right? But the question is, how are you going to respond to that? Or how are you going to react to that? And that
Okay.
determines whether you're going to experience the stress or not. So there are two things here, Anshu. The immediate thing is that you need to have some coping skills. So when you
Right.
mention meditation, you can say, okay, I'm feeling stress at the moment. Let me try and breathe in, breathe out, breathe in, breathe out. And in after about 2, 3 minutes, you at least the stress seems to be going down. So that kind of way of using our breath for controlling it and then feeling the stress slowly coming out of our
Hmm.
mind, that is the immediate thing. So for example, that is a coping skill.
Okay.
Other coping skills are, for example, if my thoughts have been triggered off by something in the external environment, I can begin to control the thought pattern by recognizing that here I have been triggered off now, and I'm now experiencing
Okay.
this. What can I do about it? And you start kind of taking your mind either to another direction or kind of reasoning with yourself about it, or you can say, okay, I know this is a challenging situation for me, but my perception of this is that I'm going to turn it into an opportunity. See how different
Okay.
responses can come about, right? So, in other words,
Okay.
immediately you can start doing these kind of things. There is also something called the long-term uh, development of our capacity. Remember, we talked about
Okay.
this capacity, so that if I increase my capacity in the long run, then it also gives me this strength. It gives me resilience. It gives me this inner strength, which then can cope with many situations which I might not have been able to cope with before. So that is the connection.
So Dr. Patni, when you talk about developing your inner strength, are you actually, is that the same as developing your capacity? You're talking about, you're using these two phrases.
That's right. So when I talk about capacity, you remember I talked about inner psychological resources. And
Yes.
also you can even think in terms of the body. Body can also support you in terms of stress, right? So that breathing in and out is a coping mechanism. So there is a relationship.
Yeah, because when you're stressed, your shoulders will hurt, your back will hurt.
Right.
You actually, these are physical manifestations of stress.
That's right. And you can do something about it, right? You can do some kind of relaxation, body scanning, and that also reduces the stress in the body and therefore reduces the stress in the mind in the short term anyway. But what we mean by capacity is our psychological resources, right? And primarily because the psychological resources are about capacity, I need to have the psychological resources with me, which will give me not only the resilience, but gives me this inner strength, right? Just like anything, if it is, brittle, then it will break. But if it is strong.
So I want you to describe inner strength to us before we carry on, before we talk more about it. What exactly is it?
Yes. So let me kind of look at it from this point of view. So we can talk about inner strength as, say, character strength, the strength of character, right? And this is something which we all have at our core. We have different kind of strengths at different levels. It is also something which is positive, right? So it is a strength, it is an inner strength, it is something at our core, it is positive as well. And also it is like a trait. It is like my kind of character. And it is like having this capacity to do something. So we can talk about strength as strength for thinking, feeling, and behaving in such a way that it can help me to achieve the best potential which I have for myself and bring it out for myself, not only for myself, but others as well. In other words, thinking, feeling, behavior, and the inner strength will then allow me to achieve the best potential in myself and also best potential in other people as well. So this generally we can talk about as a strength, which is like a characteristic which I have, which helps me to think in a certain way, feel in a certain way, to do things, take actions in certain ways, and that will help me to achieve the best. Now you can see the relationship between inner strength and stress, because if I have this capacity for regulating my thoughts and my feelings and my behavior in a positive way, because function according to a certain way, then of course I have this capacity. And this self-regulation which I now have, which is firmly established in terms of this strength, then it will make this capacity to be available to me, which is then going to be able to deal with many different kinds of stresses. So this is what so the connection between stress and capacity and inner strength. And inner strength is like developing your, that strength which can withstand a lot of force.
So now here's the $1 million question now. How do we develop our inner strength? Because you're saying, if you develop your inner strength, most situations that come in front of you, you will have the capacity to deal with them.
That's right.
Correct? So how do we develop this? And how much time is needed? How much effort is needed? Could you give us literally a step-by-step guide to doing this?
Sure. Yeah. But before we do that, I think we should mention some inner strengths, right? So what do we mean by the inner strengths? So we can talk about virtues and strength. So some of these virtues are universal, they are available in many different cultures, many different religions. And for example, we can take wisdom as a virtue. Now, wisdom will express itself as a strength in creativity. Some people who are creative have got this inner strength which comes through creativity. And wisdom can also be seen as this kind of inner wisdom, this knowledge and experience which come together as wisdom, which then is expressed as this very kind of fine-tuned mind, curiosity, being able to see from different perspective, to be able to contemplate on things, to be able to do this. These are all strengths, right? Another one is that, we can talk about courage. Courage is
Okay.
expressed as a strength. You are a brave person. You are a persevering person. You are an honest person. You have got this zest and energy for life. If those things are developed, then that inner strength will start coming out. And there are many, many different strengths which we can talk about, but that is another subject maybe for another day. But how to develop, this is the important point.
Yes.
So starting with number one, okay? Number one, we have to think about these 4 A's, which I talked about before. The 4 A's of conscious living, because it is through conscious living that you will develop this inner strength. What are the 4 A's? Awareness, alertness, attention, action. These are what I call the 4 A's of conscious living, which means you are here right now in the present moment, and whatever is happening in the present moment, you have got the power to change it. So if we want to develop something as an inner resource, we have to do it in the present moment. You can't think of it in the past, or you are hoping that it will happen sometime in the future. You have the power to do it right now. And that means that it's the present moment in which it is going to happen, which requires what? It requires awareness in the moment.
Okay.
It requires present in the moment. It requires for you to be alert that this thought process is going in this direction. I need to bring it into creativity, or I need to be telling myself I am persevering with whatever I'm doing. Okay. It is in the moment that is going to take place. So you get alerted, you pay attention to the thought or the feeling or the behavior, and then you change it at that moment. So that is the overall kind of way in which you're going to do it. Okay. Developing awareness, developing alertness through knowledge and understanding, and then paying attention to it in the moment, and then changing it in the moment. Okay. So that's
action.
number 1.
That is action, right?
That is action. That's right.
Yeah.
Number 2, identify what is the best in you. Each one of us has got some strengths. Okay. Identify what is the best in you and use that as a platform, so that if I have this kind of, fine mind, and I can use that fine mind to help all my other strengths. So I can, for example, one of the greatest strength you can have is love, compassion, and kindness.
Right.
Developing that means that I need to have this fine mind. Okay. So if I use my strength, then I can use that strength to help develop other strengths as well. So that's number 2.
Okay.
Number 3, obstacles are going to come in your life because you are trying to do something different. Like we know that, if you want to do something different, we will see many obstacles coming in our way. Look at obstacles as opportunities for growth and development. That's number 3.
That's fabulous. Obstacles as opportunities. Yes, that's fantastic, actually.
So it's like saying, this glass is not half empty, it is actually half full. I appreciate the water which is in the glass. And therefore, I look at obstacles as opportunities for development and growth. Okay. And the other thing is, number 4, is that practice what you already mentioned, meditation and mindfulness, because that really is something which allows us to be in the moment, develop an increased capacity for awareness and presence of mind. Mindfulness meditation is very good exercise to do on a daily basis. Number 5, don't forget the value of relationships. Okay. Through relationships and through our support in our immediate family and friends and even our acquaintances, they can be a huge support in developing our inner strength. So we can take support from
Okay.
everyone and say, I'm trying to develop this strength. How can you help me? Right?
Okay.
And value this relationship not only as something which is going to help me throughout my life and in all different contexts, but in terms of developing this inner strength, also valuable.
Okay.
Last one is take it step at a time. Okay. Don't get discouraged. If you come across challenges, use it as an opportunity. It is not how many times you fall down. It is how many times you are willing and able to get up. Okay.
Wonderful. So that is your resilience, isn't it?
That is your resilience. And take it step at a time, take it day at a time, take it moment to moment. And soon enough, you will find these strengths are now developing in yourself. And even if it takes 1 month or 1 year or 10 years, persistence, perseverance is really something which we need to develop even to start with, because that is our fuel for the journey. So we need to think about developing that inner strength in this kind of ways in which I've been pointing out.
So, Dr. Patni, you talked about some of the strengths which we need to develop, like wisdom, etc. What would you say is the most important of those? Because you named a bunch of them.
Yeah, I mean, again, it could be something which is individualistic. So for me, for example, wisdom comes right at the top, because wisdom then kind of allows all the other things to come together, because I value knowledge, I value wisdom. That's the person I am. There are people whose hearts are very open. So for them, developing loving kindness and compassion and emotional and social intelligence becomes a powerful technique and a powerful strength for them to then develop other things as well. So, for example, in loving compassion and kindness, emotional and social intelligence, you can become courageous. You can have this perspective which is very fulfilling, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there are basically 5 different kind of constellation of values. One is wisdom, which I've already mentioned. The other one is courage, which I've talked about as well. Bravery, perseverance, honesty as well. And then humanity, looking at loving kindness and compassion and emotional and intelligence, social intelligence as well. Another one is temperance, protecting ourselves, in regulating ourselves, forgiveness, humility, self-regulation, tempering your total personality. And the last one is what we call the spiritual dimension, the transcendental dimension, whereby there is gratitude, there is hope, there is faith, there is spirituality, there is meaning and purpose. So all these are strengths which anybody, if they persist, will be able to develop. And therefore, although there is no kind of strict hierarchy, but whatever appeals to you as a strength, just start off with that, and you will see that others will then follow step by step.
And you think that in developing these, we will be able to cope with whatever stresses come our way in life?
That's right. So as I mentioned, that there is a relationship between stress and challenge and capacity. Capacity becomes our focus because that is something which we can control. Demands, we may not be able to control the demands.
We can't control,
right? External environment will bring up so many challenges. So if we talk about capacity, then we are talking about inner resources, psychological resources, emotional resources. And these resources can be described as these virtues, these inner strengths. And these resources, for example, creativity, bravery, love and compassion, humility, forgiveness, appreciation of beauty even, right? These are strengths which can then develop our resources to the extent that, it can allow us to meet these challenges which we face.
Wonderful. That was wonderful. And as always, Dr. Patni, you give us so much information that I need to go and always listen to our chats about 3 or 4 times before I can absorb what you've said a little bit. Um, but tell me, any final guidance about this topic, related to our lives before we end the chat?
I think all of us will experience challenges throughout our life, right? That is a fact of life. The fact
That's
of
a
life,
given, yes.
That's a given. So first of all, acknowledge and recognize that there is going to be challenge. The thing is that how prepared I am to face these kind of challenges. So not only kind of thinking about, what is my capacity in which direction and what is it that I can begin to think about improving, and then to have a plan of action. Okay.
Right.
And you have a plan of action for your self-development,
Mm-hmm.
and you kind of work through that day by day.
Okay.
I'm telling you that you will see that there is going to be a difference, even if it takes, 1 month, 1 year. Still, it is going to make that difference.
Okay. So when you say have the plan of action, you gave us 6 points that we need to develop, right? Mm-hmm. So you're actually saying have a plan so you can work on each one of them every day, or work on one at a time?
Yeah,
because those 6 points are a lot.
That's right. You can work one at a time. So for example, if I say, okay, develop a kind of what you call creativity in your life. Okay. Mm-hmm. So which means creativity in all directions, creativity in your relationships, right. Creativity in terms of your thinking and your relationship with all different, aspects of your life, creativity in terms of arts, creativity in terms of, taking up, something which allows this creativity to take place, because creativity in itself opens up many different doors within ourselves.
Yes. Yes.
And it opens the door of our imagination, our thinking, our way of functioning in the world. And if you just take one thing, so for example, if I say again, let me develop some of my emotional intelligence, which means that how can I become more resilient in my emotional dimension? Then just work with that. And then you can start working with something else.
Okay.
So my suggestion is take up one thing,
yes.
and just work on it, just to get, the feel of it, and then to develop other things besides that as well.
So from what you're saying is for us to work on ourselves. What about children? Do you think something should be put into the curriculums for school-going children to develop their strength? Because the world we're going into, and one of my theories is that a lot of this stress, and my family's going to laugh when they hear me say this, but it's because of this little device that we're carrying with us all the time called the what used to be just a simple phone, which is now the smartphone. We're talking here, we're talking there, we're connected to the internet, we're seeing what's happening in Hong Kong, we're talking to someone in the US. We're all over the place. Our focus is all over the place.
That's right.
So and it's just increasing for the next generation.
That's right. So think about the phone device as a hub of connections, right?
Okay.
So you're connected with the whole world, basically.
Yes.
Now imagine if you're just connected with one thing, the stress is coming from there. The challenge is coming from there. But now if you're connected to the whole world, which means the way in which everything is going to come into your life. Not only that, but the speed at which it is coming is also frightening. It can be frightening.
Yes.
In the sense that you receive a message instantaneously from the other side of the world. And
it's overwhelming.
It is overwhelming. Why? Because there are 100 messages coming. So for example, I have, maybe coming 250 messages a day. Now, how much pressure is going to that put on me? Not only to kind of read whatever is going on, but then to start reacting and responding to that also creates a challenge. So to be able to kind of put some disciplines into place and developing the strength to be able to discipline ourselves. That becomes an important part of the child's journey as we kind of instill some of this value right from the very beginning. Creativity, curiosity, perseverance, talk about love, kindness, sharing, caring. These are so important in the development of the child. And some of these things we miss out because there is so much kind of, like you say, is the focus of the children is very much taken up by the mobile phone or whatever device. And therefore, it takes away the opportunity for self-development. But not to say that it's all bad, because, they can get
no, absolutely not. Absolutely not.
support from, from friends and family through this kind of hub of interconnections.
Connections, yes.
But just to kind of make sure, like, a knife can be used to, hurt somebody, or the knife can also be used to save a life. Same device.
Yes.
In the same manner, the phone can be used to put more stress on ourselves, or it can help us to even reduce the stress by listening to this talk on the YouTube, so that on the device, if I listen to it, will help me.
Yes. It's just a matter of teaching them discipline. That when do they, say no, or teaching ourselves discipline. Why them? Like I use that excuse you've just said, Ramesh Bhai, a lot, because I'm on the phone a lot. But what's happening now is that there's people from all over the world contacting me and saying, help us with this, help us with that. And I mean, there are times when I'm exhausted just responding to people. Yes. So I have to also discipline myself and say that, no, I mean, there are times when you just have to stop.
Yes. Yeah, so for example, I've seen people tell their children, okay, no device time. The next half an hour, just stay without any kind of connection with any device. And that is the kind of discipline which then begins to come, just like you're giving your example. And then say quiet time. You say quiet time, just calm down, sit quietly. That is your quiet time. Engage time, sharing and caring time, and so on and so on. So, children can be taught some of these and given experiences which can then lead later on to development of these inner virtues and values. And this becomes the basis. And part of the parenting, I think, is that we need to not only kind of set the boundaries, as it were, in terms of what is good and what is not good, what is right and what is not right, what is the truth and what is the falsehood. Now, besides that, we need to also be able to give them the values, because how are you going to decide what is good and what is not good? So if I know that this is the right value to follow, then of course I will say, yes, this is the good thing to do, this is the right thing to do, this is the truthful thing to do. And all this can come through our interaction with the child. And therefore, this kind of engaged way of being with the child in such a way that we not only tell them about it, but much more important is through our own example. They learn how to be the person you want them to be. Okay, be the change you want to be, and not only for your own sake, but be the change for others as well, so that they can see you, that this is the person who has got this inner strength, has got this inner values, inner virtues, which are helping this person to be in this kind of state in which they look very strong characters, because they can face any challenge. So by demonstrating that this can be done through your own example, and also giving them some practical ways of inculcating some of these values, very important for us to then teach them how to become more resilient, to have this inner strength of character, and then to be able to deal with challenges.
That was a magnificent talk. Thank you so much. And I hope we reach out to a lot of people and we manage to help a lot of people. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Anshu, and thank you for inviting me once more. Thank you. It's a pleasure.
You're welcome. And thank you for taking the time out.